Welcome to the podcast about venture capital, where investors and founders alike can learn how VCs make decisions and reach conviction. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Tim Draper joins us today from San Mateo. Tim is a prolific venture capitalist and is founder of Draper Associates, DFJ, and the Draper Venture Network, a global network of venture capital funds. He's also the founder of Draper University, an immersive entrepreneurship program, and the creator and star of Meet the Drapers, an international pitch competition reality TV series. Can't wait to hear more about that, Tim. Tim has also been called the creator of viral marketing. He's a huge and early proponent of Bitcoin, blockchain, and Web3, and he has led investments in companies such as Coinbase, Carta, Tesla, Skype, SpaceX, Twitch, Hotmail, and Robinhood, amongst many others. Tim, your reputation precedes you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me on the show. This is fun. This is the first time I think I've been on the Full Ratchet.
It is the first time. It's crazy to me that we've been at this 8 years. I know we've had your son. That was probably 6 or 7 years ago, but it's such a pleasure to have you here. So, Tim, I know you come from a long line of venture capitalists. Can you tell us a bit about your family's history in venture?
Yeah, my grandfather was the first Silicon Valley venture capitalist, and my dad was a pioneer of venture capital. And then I wasn't planning on being a venture capitalist, but I found that as an entrepreneur, I couldn't focus just on one thing. So I needed to have a variety, and I found that venture capital was just the right thing for me. And I saw what it did for the Silicon Valley and how incredible it was for creating wealth and jobs and just a good economy and for sort of being a change agent for the world. And I got excited about it. And so I made it my mission to spread venture capital and entrepreneurship around the world. Oh, also my children, 3 of my children are venture capitalists. My son, Billy, runs Path Ventures. He worked with me for 4 years. My son, Adam, runs Boost Ventures, and they focus on sci-fi, turning sci-fi to reality. And my daughter, Jessie Draper, runs Halogen Ventures, and she only backs women. And she's on her 3rd fund, and she is a real force for good there.
What an amazing family. I've spoken with Jesse a few times, and then I think last time Adam was on the show, he said his goal was to develop an Iron Man suit someday, and I'll have to get the update and see where he's at on that venture.
Yeah, that's gotten him into VR and exoskeletons. Somehow he's involved in the oceans now. And Bitcoin, mostly because he figured that was going to be the currency of the future, so Iron Man would only use Bitcoin.
Well, you're not afraid of deep tech and sci-fi either. I know that you've been a long-time investor in space and frontier tech.
Yeah, the way I describe how I invest is I start swimming really, really hard and hope that a wave comes. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, we've invested in a lot of interesting companies, and Elon Musk, you got to give him the credit for this, but he broke a logjam in transportation and space that has opened up entrepreneurial creativity in a whole new way. So I think that there are going to be some interesting things happening there. And I also think, of course, that Bitcoin and the blockchain and smart contracts are going to completely transform the world economy. When you have a currency that moves money faster, more efficiently, one that doesn't require an accountant, doesn't require a lawyer, that has the ability to increase circulation. And with better circulation, you have a better economy around the world. I mean, that is the key. It's funny, circulation's the key to your body too. Better circulation means you don't get Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Better circulation around the world means you don't get poor. Everybody's rich. And Bitcoin creates better circulation around the world.
How do you feel about inflammation, Tim?
Inflammation is happening in Russia. and inflammation is happening in the ego of Mr. Xi. And I think that those two inflammations are creating huge problems in our world.
I think you're right. I might be.
You need leaders. You need leaders who kind of trust their people. Leaders who trust their people enough to give them the freedom to operate. And then if they operate freely, then everybody makes a living and everybody figures out how to make for a good life.
So let me challenge you. You know, a certain degree of control and a certain degree of having elected representatives as a long historical track record of providing some balance in society, right? We can't just leave. Everything can't be decentralized, right? Because a lot of constituents don't know how to best represent themselves.
It's very funny. Yeah. I created a T-shirt that said "Decentralize everything," but it's really because you probably can't get there. Even though if we were all completely decentralized, there would be certain things that would have to slowly creep up to be centralized. But instead of having the president comment on every little thing, it should be the other way around. It should be the family starts, and if they have a problem, then they can go out to the community. And if the community has a problem, you go out to the city, and the city has a problem, you go out to the bigger and bigger and bigger. And so most great presidents should have almost nothing to do. They should trust their people and only engage when it's a very, very, very important thing that will affect all 300 million citizens of the U.S. and all 8 billion people in the world. But there are times, of course, where if you set the whole thing free, that certain people might harm other people in building their value. And that's where better incentive systems are not a bad idea. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to have slap down laws, but sometimes incentives to do the right thing are required. But it's interesting. People live up to trust. If you trust people, my job is all about trust. My job is about investing in people with an idea. So I'm completely betting on the future. I'm trusting them to do the best thing they can with that money. And they live up to the trust. More than 99 times out of 100, they live up to the trust. And I think that is a much better way to run a business, a society, a government, whatever. It's just better. So I do like the decentralization of everything. I do think that most best decisions are made very locally.
Is it fair game to ask you about Theranos?
Sure.
So tell me, was there trust there, and did trust break down, or, what was the...
I don't think I ever lost trust in her. I think she got scared and surrounded herself with lawyers, and the lawyers told her not to say anything. And so by not saying anything, the press felt like there was maybe more there than meets the eye. And so they kept coming. And then the government came in. I think you get that kind of scrutiny. I'm sure there are going to be some things that don't look perfect. Most of the time when you make a decision based on fear, it's usually a bad decision. And if something goes wrong, you got to come right out with it. And that's, if there are any lessons learned there, that would be one of them. If anything's wrong, come out with it right away and then say, but we still, we're saving all this angst because you don't have to take a pint of blood from a child, There were.
Do you think with more time, a little more money, and more transparency that they could have gotten the science and the product to work?
Well, they had it working in two places, herpes and something else. So it was already working for some things. But I wouldn't have given her more money at that point because she's spending it all on her lawyers. That was a big mistake. And that was a fear-driven decision, and you listen to the lawyers say, don't talk to the press. Big mistake. So I think, I think most of the best decisions people have made have been building opportunity rather than cowering in fear. And those are that's a good lesson to learn.
So back on decentralization for a minute, Tim. I suspect you're more of a Jefferson guy than a Hamilton guy, but when it comes to these decentralized structures, do you think the DAO is the right mechanism for managing these decentralized entities, or do you see this evolving into something else?
Well, first, Jefferson versus Hamilton. I love them all because the founding fathers created freedom for our country. And that has taken us, for 200 years, it was really the best thing going on the earth. Recently, somehow, we've allowed the government to creep into too much of our lives. And I think that lack of trust in our people is taking away our freedoms. So I'm very concerned about that. But the DAOs are really cool. And I love what technology often does for us. It opens up new avenues. And the corporate structure has served us well for a long time and probably will for years to come. But when Jeff Bezos becomes super wealthy, somehow people are angry about that. I honor him and bless him every day. When I say I need a toothbrush and it shows up 4 hours later, I think, wow, thank you, Jeff. Well done. But a lot of people are saying, why is he rich and I'm not? And I think that DAOs might be able to solve that schadenfreude that some people have in their minds. It will allow a corporation is set up for the good of the shareholders, and the shareholders are the founders, the early investors, and the employees. And that's who gets shares in the business. And they build the value of the business and go. Well, it turns out that people aren't allowed to, just ordinary people aren't allowed to invest at an early stage in companies like Amazon, because I guess our government is protecting us from ourselves, but it's making a mistake, I think. And it would have been, because what you're doing is saying you're not allowed to invest in Amazon until it's beyond the growth stage and it's just sort of a mature company and gone public, goes public. And you're not allowed to be a part of it. But with DAOs, with a decentralized autonomous organizations, and the whole business is based on tokens rather than shares, similar kind of thing. But those tokens can go not just to the employees and the founders and the investors, early investors, but they can go to the early customers or the suppliers or anyone at the community, anybody else who might feel that they should benefit from something like this. I mean, we all benefit when Bezos pays his taxes. We all benefit when we make a transaction and the Amazon delivery shows up right on time. We all benefit from every deal we make. And Amazon's made a lot of deals with a lot of people, and they've fulfilled their side of that requirement. So I think when people sort of get angry that he's rich and they're not, I think they're missing that he has made a zillion deals with a zillion people, and they are all very satisfied. But with a DAO, more people would be wealthy from something like an Amazon.
Well, and you're wealthier in your toothbrush, right? Like collectively, he's raised the standard of living and convenience for all in ways that we can't really put value on. Tim, as you're sizing up opportunities, we've seen decentralization, Web3, blockchain manifest mostly in finance, banking applications so far, but we're seeing use cases and applications outside of that, whether it be insurance, real estate, geopolitics, the internet. As you're thinking about killer apps and use cases as an investor, what do you think are the profile characteristics of an opportunity that lend well to decentralized technology?
Well, here I'm going to just start with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin actually created a banking system that didn't require all the people living in all those huge, beautiful structures talking to all those other people in government living in all those big, huge structures that we are all supporting by using the current banking system. Suddenly, it can all be done in software, and all of that is not as necessary as it was before. So that transformed banking. Well, you're also seeing that it could transform finance. It can transform accounting, because all the accounting can be done right on the blockchain automatically. We have a company that does that called Cryptio. It can transform the way we're taxed. The taxes can be on every transaction. And that way you actually can catch all the cheats too, or not catch them, but they'll have to pay taxes, because on every transaction, some rich guy who's been dodging taxes in Greece owns a boat. When he bought that boat, if he bought it for Bitcoin, the government could have just taxed that transaction, and it would have been. And that tax on transactions, that could be like 0.025%. And all the governments would have more money than they ever imagined. The other thing is that in other industries, in finance, I can't wait for the time I can raise a fund all in Bitcoin, invest it all in Bitcoin, have the employees and suppliers, have the entrepreneurs pay their employees and suppliers all in Bitcoin, and then have all of that be in one walled garden where everybody knows exactly where all that money went. And that is a really valuable thing. And we wouldn't.
Why is that not possible today, Tim?
Because everything has to be in the U.S. Everything has to be translated back to dollars, and then back to Bitcoin, and back to dollars, back to Bitcoin. It triples the accounting bill. Mm. If they just said, "Hey, look, if you keep a walled garden in Bitcoin, you can pay your taxes in Bitcoin," then I could do it. And I could do it, and my accounting bill would be way less. It wouldn't need an audit, wouldn't need a transfer agent, wouldn't need a lawyer on the thing. I mean, we could have a really good relationship that is just about the investor and the entrepreneur. And that could be incredibly valuable. And to society, think of the friction that takes away. It's fantastic.
Tim, you've been bullish on.
But I got to go into the other industries. Real estate, the blockchain can keep track of title. The tokens can tokenize ownership of real estate, so real estate purchases can be shared. If you wanted to get into commercial real estate, I think you'd need, to make a $10 million investment or something. It's a big purchase. Yep. But you could get into commercial real estate just by, if somebody were able to tokenize, then you could buy a piece of someplace in Miami or Austin or wherever. And then insurance is going to change in a number of ways, and government's going to change. Biggest industries in the world have the potential to be transformed because of Bitcoin, the blockchain, and smart contracts.
Tim, you've been bullish on Bitcoin and the blockchain as long as I can remember. I've been hosting the show for 8 years. And I remember back in probably 2016, early 2016 timeframe, we were going deep on the blockchain and people were snickering about Bitcoin. It was, I believe in blockchain. I don't believe in Bitcoin. It seems
They're probably
clear
not
to me.
snickering anymore. They were snickering when Bitcoin was at 200 and now it's at 20,000.
They're grumbling now that they didn't buy more.
Snickering, usually snickering is not a good strategy.
No, it's not.
Optimism is a better strategy. Optimism works very well.
So tell me why you're so, it's clear to me why the killer app for Bitcoin is store of value, but tell me why you're optimistic about medium of exchange and all these other applications for Bitcoin where, some may argue that it's not the most efficient method for transactions, for instance.
Oh, it isn't yet, but it's about to be. Well, with OpenNode on the Lightning Network, Bitcoin's faster than the Visa network. So why are we still using the Visa network? The retailers haven't realized that they're going to save 2% every time somebody swipes a credit card if they use Bitcoin. So I think that that's coming. People, you said store of value, sure, but people use it for remittance, for paying people without bank accounts, for paying people remotely. People use it for, God, I was buying a house and they knew who was buying it. And they said, well, no, we don't want dollars. We want Bitcoin. I said, no way. The moment you can get food and clothing and shelter all in Bitcoin is the moment you realize that you shouldn't hold any more fiat currency ever.
And you don't have any qualms or concerns about compute and energy and power, required to execute these transactions?
No, because the ones that are like all those transactions are happening on OpenNode, off chain. They don't use any energy. Very little energy is used off chain. This is where one of those, where the press and the technology have not quite meshed. The press is saying, oh, but it uses all that energy. Well, it uses a certain amount of energy and it's all based on transactions of 7 transactions a second or something, which is tiny. But what OpenNode does is it takes it off chain, does all of these transactions, and then brings it back on chain. So you're not using the Bitcoin blockchain that often. You're doing all the transactions off the chain, and then you're doing them, and they don't take any energy. They're proof of stake, if that. They're just such lots of small transactions. And then you aggregate them and do one big transaction on the blockchain. It doesn't take very much energy at all.
So, Tim, the other sort of element of Web3 that we haven't talked about is sort of the metaverse and I guess NFTs. We haven't chatted about that either. Meta or Facebook has kind of had its struggles well documented earlier this week. Is it too early to expect consumers to sort of embrace and adopt the metaverse? And if so, when are we going to see some more mass market use cases?
Well, I have VR goggles and I enjoy them once in a while. And we've done meetings in VR, which is great fun. We use Arthur for that. And we tend to be early adopters of this sort of thing. And so it'll take some time. And I think people need to connect to Web 2 with Web 3. They need to be able to connect their phone with their VR so that if they're not in a VR call, they can still participate through their phone or their computer. So I actually think that that's all coming. And the creativity is there. You see it. I mean, boy, I can remember I've probably been in VR 20 or 30 times. I can remember everything I did in every VR incident. So something cool is happening there. I think we're, moving into a time where the brain and the computer are going to interface in better and better ways. and the human and the computer continue to interface in better and better ways. And I guess you can call that the metaverse. And of course, all these engineers who read Ready Player One are very excited about what the metaverse could be, because it really brought you into a world where you said, oh, wow, this is so fun. And then people's definition of Web3 are very different. So sometimes they mean that everything is on a decentralized web. Sometimes they mean everybody's in VR. Sometimes they mean that everybody's identity is proven. But lots of things are happening, and I guess they're all getting incorporated into Web 3.0.
So, Tim, we're talking about frontier tech here, and the original next frontier was space, right? Before the metaverse. You talked about Elon before. Can you tell the audience a bit about how you first met Elon and then when you first made an investment in SpaceX?
God, I first met him when he was pitching something called Confluence or Confinity, something like that, which merged with X.com, and the combination became PayPal. And he was very impressive then. He's very impressive now. We've had a number of conversations that continue, which is great fun. And he is on a mission to either improve this world or get us off it. And his innovations they seem sci-fi like, but when he says, okay, we're going to, do the boring company, we're going to bore holes through the earth, people thought he was, thinks he's crazy, but they thought he was crazy when he said, we're going to Mars. And he ended up getting all the best engineers in the world working on that project in SpaceX. I think that's really what we have in Elon. We have a great leader who is taking us and helping us progress. And by picking big targets, he's attracting great people to those targets. And whether the boring company or the neurological one, the brain-computer interface, are successful or not, there will be successful entrepreneurs who do those things. And a lot of that will be because Elon opened up people's minds to the idea.
Tim, what was the hardest check you had to write to SpaceX? I know there were ups and downs on that journey.
The first one. Yeah. You know how that happened is I was talking to Jurvetson, and he was spending all his time launching rockets, and he was flying to Nevada to the desert so he could launch rockets, so he could do this or whatever. And I said, Steve, you're spending a lot of time on rockets. Why don't you just find us the best rocket company you can and bring it in and we'll do it. And he got all excited. He went back, and then about 4 months later, he came and he said, you know the best rocket company? It's Elon's. This is after we're thinking Elon is already, he should be spending more of his time on Tesla. And we said, okay, Steve, sounds good. But that first check, it was at a high valuation. But Elon had put so much of his own money into it that he had to have it be at a high valuation. Of course, it looks pretty low now. I think it's 1,000 times on the money now.
Wow. How do you even think about underwriting a deal like that when it's deep tech?
Hey, by the way, now that you've told me that, the hardest checks I've had to write are usually the ones that work out the best.
Is that right?
Yeah, because I'm kind of on the fence. It's like, should I, whatever. Anyway, those end up going very well.
So how do you think about underwriting those and thinking about risk and upside when in some cases the technology component is deep, so it's very challenging, and the markets may be nascent, and like metaverse and even the space market, it's massive now, and it's easier to measure now. But at the time you wrote that check, it was probably very difficult to imagine the ecosystem that would spawn around SpaceX.
Well, venture capitalists fry their brains thinking through all the risks of making an investment in a new startup. And they're right, but they're making a huge mistake, because if you think about all the risks and all the horrible things that can happen, you'll drive yourself crazy. So what I do is just the opposite. I say, what if it works? Is that a world I want to live in? And that's what helps me make the decision. If it works, first, how big does it get? And is that a world I want to live in? And that turns out to be a great way of investing. And our investors are very happy with my strategy there. and it seems to work. And I have been with a lot of partners who are really good at telling me all the risks. But look, it's two girls and a cat getting a business started, and you're saying, okay, you're going up against Google and they've got 100,000 employees. There are a lot of risks here. So I can't even fathom the risks. My brain doesn't even go there.
Amazing. A little counterpoint here. What's the hottest space in tech that you're least excited about?
Oh, that I'm least excited about.
Yeah, it doesn't map. You mentioned you don't want to invest in things in a future you don't want to see. Is there anything in the space now that you're not bullish on?
I feel like if I answer this question, I'm going to miss an entrepreneur that's doing something cool. So it doesn't feel like one I really want to answer, because if I say, whatever, that I've seen too many specialized social networks, for instance, then somebody will come with a social network that's specialized, and all of a sudden I'll go, oh my God, I totally missed that because I didn't want to do any socially specialized network. A lot of entrepreneurs will come just, trying to save the world, but they haven't gone through all the thought process. So here's my advice to entrepreneurs. First, think about what's the problem you want to solve. Then figure out how you're going to solve it. Then figure out what the product or service is that you're going to provide that's going to help solve that problem. And then figure out how you're going to make money solving that problem. And then how you're going to distribute it around the world. That's what I make my students at Draper University do. Because there are a lot of people who just say, oh, there's a problem. And they're the cynics and the whiners and whatever. And then there's the group that say, here's a problem and here's how I would solve it. But then they never really do it. And those are the ones who have the creativity, but not the energy to create it. And then they're the ones who create the products. And some of them haven't thought through what's the business model? How am I going to make money? And if they don't make money, they're not doing anybody any favors. In fact, they could become part of the problem. They could end up being on the street themselves if they don't make money. And then how to distribute, that's also a technique that is very important. And what I say to them is make your customer into your sales force. So you delight your customers so much that they start selling your product for you. And that's the best way to distribute a product.
Most people over the years that have been on the show say that entrepreneurship can't be taught, but it seems with Draper University, you may disagree. I know.
What's great about that is
what's that?
Whenever anybody says something can't be done, that's when I think, how would I do that? And that's how I started Draper University. People told me, entrepreneurship can't be taught. It's like you're an entrepreneur or you're not. And I thought, well, how would I teach entrepreneurship? And that's what we've done at Draper University of Heroes. We encourage people to become entrepreneurs, and they have to kind of become heroes And that means they're willing to take long odds at some extraordinary outcome. And the odds improve over time the longer they stick with it. But we have a very unusual way of teaching, and it's nothing like the school thing that any of these other people get.
Do you attempt to measure success? Your success with that program?
Here's one. We can measure success in a lot of ways. We've had 3,200 students. They've come from 103 different countries. They have started about 800 companies. 5 are unicorns. I think something like 20 are worth more than $100 million. They, where Harvard and Stanford say, yes, we're such a great school, 85% of our graduates get a job when they get out. Our average student creates 5 jobs. So you want to measure? We win. And we only take 5 weeks of that entrepreneur's time. We don't take 4 years.
Well done, sir. Tim, you've seen many cycles. Everyone is different. Give us your take on the venture market today and, whether we have further to fall or if you think we're poised for recovery in 23.
I think we're going to go falling a little farther, but this is the same kind of inflationary thing that we had with Jimmy Carter way back when, where he was spending and we were printing too much money. And somehow we've got some program it's a bill. I don't know if it passed or not. I never keep track of those things, but where they said this is the inflation fighting bill and they're spending another $1 trillion. And I'm thinking, but wait, how are you going to stop inflation by spending another $1.1 trillion? I don't get it, but people have tried to explain it to me. I still don't get it, and I don't think I ever will because I don't think it works. I think when you have inflation, if you want long-term control over your country and you want your country's economy to grow, you need that inflation under control. Just ask Argentina and Venezuela and Nigeria. Those are countries where Bitcoin would be incredibly popular, but the governments are so bad that they're actually making it tougher for people to use Bitcoin. But when you have to fight inflation, it's when the birds come home to roost or whatever. People have to pump up the interest rates. And if you pump up the interest rates, that means the return, the no risk return goes up, which means that people are more willing to put their money in something with no risk return than a stock. And so a 1% interest rate translates to 100 PE, price earnings ratio in the stock market. If it goes to 2, that brings it down to 50. Goes to 3, it goes down to 33, and so on. Which means that if you were at 100 times PE, it's pretty quickly you move to 50 and then to 30. And if the stock market drops, people get poorer and they're a little more cautious with their cash, and then they have to sell again. And then, so it overcompensates. So the stock market overcompensates. It goes further down than it should because people are forced to sell. They don't want to sell, but they're forced to sell just to eat or to pay for their housing or whatever it is. And that is what starts creating the recessions and depressions. And then it gets worse because then the big companies do big layoffs. So there are a whole bunch of people out of work. And then being out of work, they don't have money. So somehow you need to put more money into the system. That's where, really good argument for Bitcoin. It's stable and there are only 21 million of them. And
Deflationary.
You aren't,
right?
yeah, and you aren't at the mercy of some political force.
Yeah, this should be a great environment for Bitcoin, you would think.
Yeah, but except that the speculators came in, they have the same problem. They can't buy their food, clothing, and shelter in Bitcoin yet. When they can, that's when there'll be a huge divergence between Bitcoin price and the stock market. But right now, people are having to sell their Bitcoin in order to pay for their groceries. Well, when I can buy my groceries with Bitcoin, I no longer need to sell my Bitcoin. And that'll pump that back up.
So, Tim, I hate to transition here, but, I was reviewing the Draper Innovation Index Q3 findings. This is a bit of a double-barreled question here, but, what do you think? First of all, can you enlighten the audience on the takeaways from that? And then what do you think this means for Silicon Valley and the Bay Area at large and, other regions, whether they be within the U.S. or international centers of innovation?
Yeah, I tried to split California into 6 and then into 3, but I got outmaneuvered by the public employee union bosses who really don't want anything to change because they control everything. But they're killing the golden goose. They're killing the Silicon Valley. People are feeling like they've got to move, they've got to do whatever. I have for years believed that the best governments recognize that they're in competition with the other governments of the world, and they need to be accountable to their people and improve if they're not. And it's starting to happen, even though California has this weather and it kept people here for a long time. We lost Elon Musk and we lost probably 2/3 of the best venture capitalists in the world. And we lost a whole bunch of entrepreneurs. And now entrepreneurs are starting, they still start a lot in the Silicon Valley, but they're also starting in Texas and Florida and Wyoming and places where government is more willing to allow them to try new things. So I created the Draper Innovation Index, and I got these great data scientists on it, and they have done an outstanding job. And the findings are extraordinary. So what they do is they measure which governments are best for innovation and which ones are worst. And that's which nations and which states within the U.S. So far, that's what we've measured. And what we found is that the United States of America is still number one, but slowly losing ground to Switzerland and Singapore and some of the Northern European countries of all things that used to be called socialist, and now they realize free markets work. And then in the U.S., where California had this huge advantage, and they still do in technology, they've dropped to like number 9 or 10. And number 1 is now Texas, number 2 is Florida, number 3 is Wyoming. And that's because those 3 have governments that are very welcoming to new concepts, new ways of thinking. The mayor of Miami says we want to be Bitcoin City, and the governor of Wyoming was contemplating paying my taxes if I would move there, paying the taxes I would have owed to California for me to move there. And they have been the best regulator for Bitcoin. Wyoming has, and then Texas, of course, has built in freedom into their hearts and minds, and they're very proud of them. And I think that they have attracted probably more entrepreneurs and venture capitalists from the Silicon Valley than any other state.
So why is Tim Draper still in San Mateo?
Oh, well, I built this school. I mean, I guess we could move the school. We are slowly putting our toes in other places. I have a Draper startup house in Austin, Texas, and we're probably building one in Miami. We're kind of all over the world, and I don't mind paying my taxes. I feel like that's fine. The regulations I will fight until I'm blue in the face. And that, I think that California is fine if they want to charge high taxes, but if they're not providing good services, they're not doubling my regulatory load, those things are not good. And those are not good for Silicon Valley, and people are going to move. And then, what's interesting is that the propositions, the initiative process was supposed to be a check against a government like this that was out of control, that was just at the mercy of one group. And that group is now the union bosses, public government union bosses, not private unions. They're great too. But public union bosses seem to have such a stranglehold over all the elected officials, all the bureaucracy. In fact, the entire bureaucracy is a part of that union. It sort of feels like it's all a special interest group that seems to be running the state. I keep thinking that maybe that will swing the other way. And we will get, people will say, well, look, it wasn't so great when Elon left. There was some politician who said, oh, good riddance to Elon in California. And I thought, what? You just said good riddance to 100,000 jobs and an icon of the world. Why would you do that? But they clearly don't understand what they've done to California, how damaging they've been. So I think eventually that will dawn on people. I don't know how many more homeless we have to get before people realize that we're getting the homeless because we're losing the industrialists. We're losing the people that would have employed them.
Tim, if we could feature anyone here on the show, who do you think we should interview, and what topic would you like to hear them speak about?
Well, I'm a big fan of Mark Benioff. I think he's really amazing. And how he manages people. That is really good. He's got 100,000 employees or something, and how he manages them, really extraordinary. Who else? Who do I interview? I interview entrepreneurs, and that's fascinating for me because I get to see what the future is going to look like. I get it about a 5-year window, maybe 10.
If you had a superpower, what would you say is yours, Tim?
Well, I'd say it was earned, not given to me. I think the earned superpower is the ability to see into the future, but it's really not me. It's really all the entrepreneurs I meet with. They give me that superpower. And then I guess my passion for encouraging innovation, change, that kind of thing, I guess that could be a superpower. Oh, and I guess at Draper University, I sort of identify mostly with Professor X, the guy who runs the school.
Sure. Why not? Last two here, Tim. What do you know you need to get better at?
I need to get better at fundraising. I don't understand. My record is extraordinary. I have a great sense for entrepreneurs. I have a huge deal flow, but I think I'm getting it. We now are the venture firm for the family office, and I think that positioning makes much more sense because institutions don't like having a single decision maker, and I'm not going to go back to a partnership decision maker. Because I spun out of a big partnership and I decided that I wasn't going to do that again. Because I want to be able to, if I see somebody and I see something in that person that is going to change the way the world works, I'm not letting partners talk me out of it.
And finally here, Tim, what is the best way for listeners to connect with you and follow along with all of the ventures in sort of the Draper ecosystem?
So I'm at Tim Draper at Twitter. I'm also Tim at draper.vc, but only email me if you've got a business plan or if you're an investor. Otherwise, I can't, I got to focus.
That's all. Well, Well, Tim, this is a huge pleasure.
Nice being
long overdue on this interview, and thank you so much, sir, for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Great. Okay, thanks, Nick. Bye-bye.
That will wrap up today's episode. Thanks for joining us here on the show, and if you'd like to get involved further, you can join our investment group for free on AngelList. Head over to angel.co and search for New Stack Ventures. There you can back the syndicate to see our deal flow, see how we choose startups to invest in, and read our thesis on investment in each startup we choose. As always, show notes and links for the interview are at fullratchet.net. And until next time, remember to over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining us.